Okay, so we are going to get started. Andy, how's the sound? Okay, we have sound. So if you are watching us online and would like the notes that they have here in the room, you can either message Andy or you can download them off the TFRC website. And so you can do that if you'd like. All right, we'll get started right away with discussion question. Again, if you don't know everyone at your table, share your name, but briefly describe the home you currently live in. So, like, I live in a single family home. It's one story. Um, it's a total of 2,400 square feet, but it has 7 bedrooms. And that's because it has 3 bedrooms downstairs, and it's a finished basement, and so it counts as bedroom space. So the house is not as big as I just made it sound. Okay. Yeah. And so just kind of share. You live in an apartment, you live in a house, you live, you know, whatever. Okay. Just describe the residence you currently live in and go. Okay, so let's continue here. And again, we're going to be talking about the tabernacle, and it's a place where God ends up dwelling, hence the discussion question about where you dwell. Now, one point that is important for us to understand in view of what we're going to talk about tonight is this whole understanding of God as creator and what is the metaphysical relationship between God being the creator and us as creation. And I'll explain what I mean by that in a second. But when we describe God, one of the attributes of God we describe is that God is everywhere. Omnipresent is the fancy term. But the problem with that, of saying it that way, and understand that anytime we use finite language, which is all we have to work with, to describe an infinite God, which is who we worship, you run into shortcomings in how you can describe him. Doesn't mean that what we say is wrong or that we can't know anything about God, but finite language can never completely 100% capture the infinite God. So when we say God is everywhere, and we can just limit that to this room, you know, if God is everywhere in this room, that means God's there and there and there and there, there, everywhere. But that really is not the best way of saying it. And it can lend to a false belief, which is called pantheism. Pantheism is the belief that everything is God. And that comes from the idea, well, if God is everywhere, that means God must be everything. And that, of course, is something we don't believe as followers of Jesus. So while God is everywhere, God is not everything. Now, what I have on the screen here is how we oftentimes envision the relationship between God and creation. So God spoke, and you'll notice God is up here, and God speaks, and now you have the universe. Okay? Well, there's a problem with this picture. And the problem with this picture is what happens if we take God away? What's left? In this picture, if we take God away, what's left? Spoke, and let's say we take God spoke away, what's left? The universe. And so in this picture, the universe is independent from God. Because you take God away, the universe is still there. Well, that's not how it works. So this picture is flawed. This is not a good way to talk about God and creation or to think about it. Let me show you a better way. Now what happens if you take away God? Everything else goes away too. This is how it works. And so when we say God is everywhere, this is a better way of understanding it. And think about what David said. Where can I go from your presence? You can't. The difference between these two pictures is kind of significant. Does this make sense? Even if it doesn't, just pretend like it does and have someone explain it to you later. But this is a big deal. Because if you take the infinite God away, you take everything away. And what does, let me get my reference here. You can write down Acts 17, verse 28. And you can look it up later. But as you look at this picture on the screen, listen to this verse. Acts 17:28. For in him we live and move and have our being. Do you see it? In him We live and move and have our being. God is not in, to me, a better way of saying it is not that God is in this room. This room is in God's presence. And we are always in God's presence because there is nothing outside of God's presence. You go outside of God's presence, that doesn't exist. God is the essence, is the baseline, is the cause of all things. And you take God away and everything else goes away. Questions? So now what we're going to be looking at tonight is the tabernacle. Because the question is, okay, if this infinite God wants to interact in the universe, well, how does that infinite God do that? Okay, how does this infinite God pop into the universe to commune with us? Okay, because that's what this God wants to do. All right, so you're going to spend quite a bit of time now at your tables looking up scriptures. And so you have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Oh, let me give you the fill in the blanks. Because if you're like me, you have to have the blanks filled in. We are distinct from God. We are not separate from God. We are distinct, which means we are not God, but we are not separate from God. If you are separated from God, you no longer exist. You are done. Which, a little bit of a rabbit trail. Well, what is hell then? Because hell, we're often taught, is separation from God. I would say that's relational separation, not metaphysical. Because metaphysical separation from God, you no longer exist. That's not what hell is. Hell is not a place where you cease to exist. Hell's a place where you exist with no relationship with God. So to me, it's more relational. Hell is more relational in nature than it is metaphysical. And if that, you're like, I have no idea what you just said, come talk to me later. Okay? So, what I want you to do at your tables is to read each of those sections. And if you want to divide and conquer, that's fine. But I do like it when you look at things together. But again, I have left. I am planning on you spending, a good half hour doing this. And so, take your time. But what I want you to do is in each section, just simply write what part of the tabernacle is being described. Okay? So, what's being described, and in some cases, the layout of the tabernacle is described. And in other cases, like the very first thing that you are going to read about is the Ark of the Covenant. I can't remember off the top of my head if it's in that passage, but somewhere, someplace, it's going to tell you not just about the Ark, it's going to tell you where does the Ark go in the tabernacle. Okay? And so I want you just to record what is being talked about, what layout details are you getting, and if we're talking about something that's in the tabernacle, where in the tabernacle does it go? All right? And tabernacle is simply a portable temple. That's all it is. Temple is a place you go to worship and encounter God. The tabernacle is a portable temple. And again, this is when they're in the desert and they are on the move. And so they need a place to, if they're going to build a place for God to dwell, it needs to be portable also. Okay? All right. So go ahead and spend some time at your tables. I like it best when you interact with each other, but do what you have to do to go through. And yeah, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Do all 8. All right? And go. Yeah, there are some really interesting pronunciation to these words. So if you're the one reading out loud, your pronunciation is the correct one. Okay, are we, anyone need more time? Okay, you have 4 minutes. 4 minutes. Okay. Let me just ask you this question. Has anyone in here built their own home or, built a home? Okay. When you're building a home, what's the first thing you do? What's one of the first things you do? Get a permit. And in order to get a permit, what do you have to have? You have to have the plans. So if I'm hiring someone to build my house, the first thing we have to do is we have to come up with the plans for the house, right? Okay. What is the first thing that when God gives his instructions for his tabernacle, what is the first thing, Exodus 25, verse 10, what's the first thing he gives instructions for? The ark. How many of you, when you are building a home, the first thing you talk to the builder about is the cabinets? Or, hey, a TV, or what? You always start with the plans. What's the layout? And God starts with the ark. Okay, I want you to build this tabernacle. Now, let's start with the ark. What? Why don't you start with the plans? But he starts with the ark. And the reason is because the ark is the most important thing in the tabernacle. So he's not going through this logically. He's going through it because this is where you start, because this is the most important piece. Now, I'm not going to argue that the rest of the pieces are in order of importance, but I'm just pointing out where he starts. He starts with the most important piece. Got to build the ark. Because ultimately, it will be over the ark where a special manifestation of God's presence occurs. So in one sense, that makes sense. But yeah, so the first thing that is built is the ark. And does it say, I don't have this in my notes, does it tell them where to put it yet? Not here. Okay. So the second thing that is built, or that is instructed to be built, I should say, because these are just the instructions. This is not the actual building. Okay? So what's the next thing that God talks about? The table. And what's going to be on the table? The bread. Are you eating the bread? You're just looking at it. Now, my understanding is once a week they would eat the bread, because you can't leave bread there forever. It's going to go rotten. But it's another word for this bread is called showbread. Well, why is it called showbread? Because it's bread that you show. It's not bread that's primarily, it's meant to be looked at. It's not primarily meant to be eaten. Okay? It's like a show horse. Is a show horse meant to be ridden? No. It's meant for people to look at. This is for showbread. Okay? It's the table for that. All right? Does it say, I don't think it says there where it goes. No, it does not. Okay. What's the next thing? The lampstand. I heard someone say, is this the menorah? Yeah. This is where you get the menorah from. Okay? And it doesn't tell you where to put the lampstand yet. Correct? Okay. Then in Exodus 20, I had you skip to Exodus 26. And now you get instructions for the tabernacle. And the section I had you read had the layout of the tabernacle, right? And you have, what are the pieces of the tabernacle? The holiest, the holy place, and the holiest place, or the holy of holies. Okay? And the entrance is on the east. So the entrance to the courtyard will be to the east, and the entrance to the holy place is on the east. Okay? All right, now, what other instructions are you given in Exodus 26, 30 to 37? Okay, the curtain, and doesn't it start talking about where you put stuff? Okay, you start to put stuff. Let me see what my next slide is. Okay, I don't have that. But it starts to tell you where to put stuff. And you're going to put the ark where? Here. Ark goes here. And where does the lampstand go? Which is mentioned first, the table or the lampstand? Table. Where does the table go? Holy place on what side? No. Look at south or north? Doesn't it say north side, south side? It's on the north side. So the table is on the north side, which, if this is east and this is west, which way is north? Very good. It goes, now, it doesn't say exactly where it goes, but it goes somewhere on the north end. And then where does the menorah go, the lamp? On the south side, and are there any further instructions? Opposite of the showbread. So, if the showbread table is here, the menorah is here. It's not here. It's not here. No, they are directly across from each other. Okay? All right. And the ark is here. All right. What's next? Exodus 27. What's that? The altar, right? It's for burnt offerings, and it's got horns on it. And yeah, you're going to put burnt offerings in there. All right? And where's the location of that? Near the entrance of what? Of the courtyard? Is it out here or is it here? It's right here. Okay? So where you offer animal sacrifices is here before the entrance of the holy place. Okay? Again, because the entrance is on the east. Okay? Then what's next? Oh, now we get the courtyard. Okay, so we get all the instructions for the courtyard there about what that's supposed to look like. Again, the entrance is on the east. And then what happens? The altar of incense. Okay, and do we get the location of that? Yeah, so it's supposed to be like in front of where the ark is. So that could be, and I'll show you in a second. But when you look this up, some places will have the altar of incense here, right in front of the curtain. I'll show you another diagram that places it here. But it's always lined up with where the ark is supposed to be. Okay, so whether people think it was here or people think it was here, closer to the entrance, it's somewhere here. You're not going to find it in this corner. You're not going to find it in this corner. You're not going to find it in this. You're going to find it in the middle, whether it's here or here. Okay? Okay, and then what's the last piece? The bronze, yeah. The basin, which is for, what's the purpose? Washing. It's not a bird bath, although I would imagine they would have a hard time keeping the birds out of there. But yeah. In the land of Israel, there is only one, in the whole land of Israel, there's only one replica of the tabernacle allowed. And this picture is from that place. So anyway. Okay, so now here we have all the pieces together. Okay? You have, this is the Holy of Holies with the ark. You have the showbread across from the lampstand. Here, the altar of incense is right here. And then you have the wash place where you wash. And now here's where you have the burnt offerings. Okay? Okay. Let me see here. Here is a rendition that shows the altar of incense. So now they've flipped it. So now east is here. Here's east. So if you walk in, here's the altar, here's the basin, here's the entrance into the holy place, and look where they have that. This technically works, but I would think it would be further on the north end. Okay? But we're going to do a little psychological experiment on all of you. We're going to do a Rorschach ink block thing, okay? I am horrible at drawing on the whiteboard. Okay, so we're going to pretend that this whole whiteboard's a courtyard. I don't have to draw the outline of a courtyard. Okay, but let's call this the holy place. And this, okay, so this is the Holy of Holies. Yeah, I misspoke. And then this is the holy place. Okay, so you have the ark here, okay, and you have the menorah here, and you have the showbread here. And again, this will work if I put the altar of incense here, but for my purposes, I'm going to go with what the last drawing showed and put it more here. Okay? Then you have the altar that you do the sacrifices on, and you have that here. Okay? Now, everyone look at that. What does it look like? What? Who said that? Who said face? Yeah. It kind of looks like a face. Now, here's what's really interesting. What is this right here? The menorah. Menorah gives off light. What part of your face do you use for light? Your eyes. And what is this? The table of showbread, which is something you look at. So you have light and something you look at, where if you go with the eyes, that's what those line up. What's this? The altar of incense, which means incense smells. And what part of your face do you use for smell? Your nose, right where the nose would be. And then what's this? The sacrifice where you put the animals, which is what you would eat. Isn't that amazing? And then what would this be? The brain, which is where the ark is. And what's in the ark? The testimony, the 10 Commandments, which is supposed to be on your minds. Now, when you carve a pumpkin, and I'm just talking a standard, normal jack-o'-lantern pumpkin, not one of these fancy things where you put in like some Star Wars episode in there. I'm just talking about a standard pumpkin. When you're carving a pumpkin, what's the first thing you do? You cut off the top of the head, right? Because you got to get all the gunk out of there. And then what do? Then you make the eyes, and then what do you make? The nose, and then you make the mouth. Now, what I had you read was the instructions. Turn to Exodus 37. Now, the first thing they make is a tabernacle, because you have to make that first. But after they make the tabernacle, look in chapter 37, what's the very first thing they make? The ark. What's the second thing they make? What's the third thing they make? What's the fourth thing they make? And what's the fifth thing they make? Exactly how you would carve a pumpkin. They make the brain first, then they make the eyes, then they make the nose, then they make the mouth. That's not the order of the instructions, but that's how they made it. This is a face. Now, so what? Who cares? All right. I want you to look at a few passages here. Okay, we're gonna do some Bible bingo here. You have. Oh, I have a space in your notes for you to draw that. If you want to draw that, go ahead. Please do better than what I did. All right. And the answer of what does this look like? It looks like a face. Now, below that, this theme of face is seen in multiple places. The first one is Exodus 25, verse 20. The cherubim are to have their wings spread upward, overshadowing the cover with them. The cherubim are to face each other. Or another way of saying that should be face to face. Okay. 33:11. The Lord would speak to Moses face to face as one speaks to a friend. Then Moses would return to the camp, but his young aide Joshua, son of Nun, did not leave his tent. Okay? So God spoke to Moses face to face. Jumping down to verse 20 of the same chapter. But, he said, you cannot see my face, for no one may see me and live. And then go to verse 23. Then I will remove my hand, and you will see my back, but my face you must not be seen. Okay? And then 34, verse 9. Oh, sorry, 29. When Moses came down from Mount Sinai with the 2 tablets of the covenant law in his hands, he was not aware that his face was radiant because he had spoken with the Lord. And then if you jump to Numbers 6. This should sound familiar to you because I say it often on Sundays, not every Sunday, but often. Verse 24. The Lord bless you and keep you. The Lord make his face shine on you and be gracious to you. And the Lord turn his face towards you and give you peace. Again, it's a little bit of a so what, but what's the significance of our faces? Our faces are our most recognizable feature, right? You see someone from a distance, their back is turned towards you. You think it's that person, but you're not sure until they turn around. And then when you see their face, you know whether or not it's them. There is no more distinguishable feature than our faces. Or think about when you were a student and maybe the teacher is talking and you're not paying attention. You know, it's theoretical. But if the teacher's looking this way and the people over there are kind of goofing off, all the teacher has to do, and then these people are going to goof off. Okay, you see how that works? Okay? But once I turn my face to you, I now am giving you my attention. It's all about the face. And so what God does is he says, I want to dwell with you and I want to be with you. And what he does is he has them build him a space, and the space is to communicate to them, I see you, I'm looking at you, I'm paying attention to you. God gives them his face. And then his presence, if we jump down to Exodus 40, verse 34, it says, "Then the cloud covered the tent of meeting, and the glory of the Lord filled the tabernacle. Moses could not enter the tent of meeting because the cloud had settled on it, and the glory of the Lord filled the tabernacle. In all the travels of the Israelites, whenever the cloud lifted from above the tabernacle, they would set out. But if the cloud did not lift, they did not set out until the day it lifted. So the cloud of the Lord was over the tabernacle by day, and fire was in the cloud by night, in the sight of all the Israelites during all their travels." So God acts earlier in Exodus with these mighty acts of power to deliver the Israelites out of Egypt. And when they see God's presence on top of the mountain, it's super, at Sinai, they eventually make it to Sinai, and at Sinai, they see God, this awesome presence of God on the mountain. It's fire and lightning and smoke, and everyone's terrified to even go near it. But then God says, "Build me a tabernacle so that I may dwell with you." And they build the tabernacle, and they, again, his face is upon them, has turned towards them. And now they are comfortable going wherever God leads them. And what has changed? What's changed isn't just God's presence. It's not just, again, God is present in this room, or this room is in God's presence. But when God's face looks at you, it changes the relationship. Because now there's this new connection you have. It's one thing to follow someone because they are big and powerful and they can do good things for you. It's another thing for you to follow someone because you know them and because you trust them. Those are two different things. And it's all about not just presence, but it's about paying attention. Again, what do little kids do with adults? And again, this is more common now because as adults, what do? We're on our phones. And when we're on our phones and there's a little kid present, what does the kid want? The kid wants your face off the phone and on them. And then they feel better because they feel like they now have your presence. Well, that's what this is. God isn't just in the room with them. God is present to them. Make sense? Now, next week, or 2 weeks, what we're going to do is we're going to see how Jesus fulfills all of this. Because this is just the tabernacle. We've got temples to go through. And then it's like, well, now there is no temple. And so now how do we have God's presence? And again, God's presence, meaning not just he's with us, but that he's looking at us, paying attention to us. He is present to us. And how does Jesus fulfill all of that? Because this theme goes all the way through the Bible to the very end. This is just the beginning. Okay, questions? Got a question? Oh, yes. I don't know that for a fact, but I would bet a lot of money on it. At least a lot of your money on it. Here, we do have time for this. Everyone go to Genesis 1. But yes, this is the tabernacle and the garden have a lot of common features, not the least of which is let's see. Okay, let me show you a couple things. Okay, on top of the ark, you have two cherubim. Okay, do you see the curtain? And oh. Some of us miss details.